The invitation came on a Wednesday. A thick envelope. Silver foiled text on matte black cardstock. Very old money meets high drama. It was addressed to my full name, one I hadn't used in years. Amelia Rowan Westmore. God, I hadn't heard that name out loud in over a decade. The embossed lettering practically screamed formality. You are cordially invited to the Westmore family reunion, hosted at the prestigious Calidora Resort, San Francisco. I held the card between my fingers, feeling its weight like it owed me something. The last time I attended a Westmore reunion, I was 20 and still naive enough to think they'd ever take me seriously. Spoiler alert, they didn't. I was the creative type, the girl who gave up a guaranteed spot at Westmore and company investments to major in hospitality in Oregon. According to my family, that was about one step above professional couch surfer. Today, the world knew me as Mia Rowan, founder and CEO of Rowan Luxe. But to the Westmores, I was still the girl who cleaned hotel rooms in Portland and didn't have a real plan. My phone lit up. Cassidy cousin, hope you got the invite. Sue upscale this year. Ugh, I almost didn't answer, but morbid curiosity won. Mia, she sang the moment I picked up. You got the invite, right? I did. Oh, good. So, listen, just a heads up, this year's reunion is kind of elevated, very exclusive. The Calidora is luxury level, so dress accordingly. I stared out the window of my office, 39 floors above Los Angeles, in the downtown headquarters of Rowan Luxe Hospitality Group. The irony? I owned the Calidora. They just didn't know it. You think I won't fit in, Cass? I asked, my voice smooth as the espresso I was sipping. Oh my God, Mia, don't be like that, she purred. Fake sweet. It's just, there'll be celebrities, founders, even a few senators. You know how the Westmores are about appearances. She met me, and I meant to keep smiling. I assume you didn't pick the venue? I asked, casually. No, I did, she chirped, way too proud. Dad said I've got an eye for luxury. Calidora's the top resort in the Bay right now. I had to call in so many favors. You wouldn't believe the hoops I jumped through. I nearly choked on my coffee. Hoops? My team had approved her request at 40% over our standard VIP rate. I saw her name in the booking system 3 weeks ago. Personally signed off on it. Must have been tricky, I said. Not for me, she beamed. The owner, M. Rowan, is kind of a mystery, but their staff totally rolled out the red carpet once they heard our name. Oh, I'm sure they did. Cassidy kept talking, but I stopped listening, because while she was gloating, I was already planning. I leaned back in my leather chair, tapped open my laptop, and pulled up the event details. If they thought I didn't belong, maybe it was time to show them what exclusion looks like when the outsider controls the guest list. The lighting, the menus, the music, the scent of the lobby. Every detail was about to pass through my hands. This wasn't going to be petty. It was going to be unforgettable. Flashback. 15 years ago, I graduated with a degree in hotel management and a head full of ideas nobody in my family gave a damn about. You're gonna change sheets for a living? My father scoffed. No Westmore wears a name tag. But I did, and I wore it with pride. I cleaned rooms, carried bags, handled angry guests, trained front desk staff, and learned the entire business from the ground up. I didn't just want to run hotels, I wanted to redefine them. I opened my first boutique property at 25. A cozy, art-forward spot in Silver Lake. It sold out every weekend. Now? At 35, I own 24 resorts in 7 countries. The Calidora, the venue for this reunion? It's my crown jewel. A stunning blend of coastal architecture and sustainable tech, with an ocean facing infinity spa and hand-picked art in every suite. It's won awards, it's in travel magazines. But to my family, I was still a disappointment. Still Mia the hotel girl. That's fine, because they were about to walk into my world without even realizing it. That night, my assistant Leo buzzed in. The reunion contract just came through, he said. Want me to bring it up? No need, I replied, grinning. I've got plans for this one. I opened the document and started making adjustments. Subtle, but meaningful. Cassidy said she wanted elegance. I'd give her a show so elegant it might just slap the smirk off her face. The memories hit harder than I expected. Being sat at the kids' table while I was already managing a hotel. Getting a congrats card when I opened my 3rd resort, but no one showed up. Or worse, Cassidy's wedding. She had me seated next to the valet staff. I figured you'd be more comfortable with your people, she'd said with a laugh. My people? I had 9 hotels under my name by then. Only one person in that entire family had ever really kept in touch. My younger sister, Lila. But even she didn't know how big things had gotten. We kept it light: vacation photos, holiday check-ins, random memes. She called right as I was reviewing the final touches for the event. "Mia," she said, voice soft. "Cassidy told me she asked you not to come. I'm so sorry." I smiled at the screen. "Don't be. In fact, I need a favor. Anything. Can you make sure everyone arrives exactly at 7 p.m.? Lila hesitated. "Okay, why?" "Let's just say Cassidy's not the only one with connections at the Calidora." The next 2 weeks flew by. I oversaw every single detail down to the specific shade of the centerpiece florals. My team executed everything flawlessly. The reunion would be extravagant, no doubt. But this time, they were the guests, and I was the host. The night before the reunion, I stood in the lobby of the Calidora in silence. My staff was finishing up polishing the marble floor, adjusting up lighting, prepping the scent diffusers with notes of citrus and ocean breeze. The space glowed under chandeliers made from recycled glass. Every detail screamed intentional luxury. Leo appeared beside me, tablet in hand. "Everything's set. You sure you want to go through with this?" "Absolutely," I said, watching the lights dance across the floor. "It's not every day I get to welcome my family home." He smiled. "Then tomorrow's going to be fun." And he was right. Because tomorrow, everything changes. By 6:45 p.m., I was standing barefoot in my penthouse suite on the top floor of the Calidora, floor-to-ceiling windows framing the San Francisco skyline. My hair was still pinned, makeup subtle but sharp, the kind of polished look that doesn't try too hard but turns heads anyway. Below me, the courtyard filled slowly with the polished and powerful, each arrival precisely timed thanks to Lila. On one monitor, I watched Cassidy sashay through the entrance in a blood-red designer dress, like she owned the place. She barked a few instructions to my staff who, bless their professionalism, followed her lead with the same blank courtesy they give to every guest. She paused near the floral installation, already posing for photos. She had no idea the arrangement behind her spelled out Rowan Luck's signature series, not that she'd know what that meant. It was my signature collection of properties, Calidora being the flagship. She just thought it looked expensive. That tracks. Next came my father, stepping out of his Bentley, flanked by 2 of my uncles in matching sports jackets, the kind that screamed wealth but whispered ego. Their wives floated behind them in heels and pearls, all smug smiles and Botox charm. Cousins trickled in after, all perfectly timed, all perfectly unaware. Inside, champagne flowed, string quartet music softened the air, and the ballroom buzzed with self-congratulations. Cassidy moved like a hostess, bragging about her venue-picking genius, recounting how she locked down the Calidora with nothing but grit and charm. I nearly laughed. The grit she referenced came from an overpriced online booking. And the charm? That was her last name. She thought that's what got her in. She didn't know I'd flagged the reservation myself, approved the request at an inflated VIP rate, and asked my team to ensure every aspect was flawless. They had no clue the person they spent years underestimating was the one who signed their check in forms. I adjusted my suit jacket slate gray, custom tailored in Milan, paired with heels I wore like armor. Leo checked his tablet and looked over. 10 minutes, he said. Everyone's in. Staff's in position. I took one last look in the mirror. The woman staring back at me wasn't the girl they laughed at. She was sharper, quieter. She didn't need to yell to be heard. She didn't need to prove anything. But she'd built something worth noticing, and tonight, they finally would. In the ballroom, Cassidy floated near the fountain again, glass in hand, talking about how the Calidora's marble flooring was imported. She was wrong, and how she personally coordinated the lighting. It had been my design since day one. She had no idea the marble came from the same quarry I visited on my first European business trip. The same business trip I didn't mention to family because, back then, no one cared where I went or why. Now, here they were, basking in my work, clueless. At exactly 7:10 p.m., the hotel manager approached Cassidy with practiced calm. "Miss Westmore," she began, "there's been a small issue with the event's reservation." Cassidy's face twitched. "Excuse me? I booked this directly through your corporate team." "Yes," the manager replied, "and the owner has a few specific instructions for this evening." Cassidy laughed, flicking a hand like she was swatting a fly. "Please, I doubt the owner of this place even knows we're here. We're not that important." She said it like a joke, but I knew the truth in her tone. She meant it. She still believed I wasn't worth noticing. That's when I stepped into the room. The lights didn't dim. The music didn't stop. But the energy shifted. One moment I was invisible. The next, I was the silence. Every head turned. And then the recognition settled in slowly, reluctantly. Mia? My father said first, his voice oddly hollow. Cassidy blinked. What are you doing here? She asked, her voice lifting with practiced disbelief. I smiled, calm and unbothered. You told Lila I wasn't invited. Something about not fitting the image. I looked around, absorbing the glances, the confusion, the stiffness of people caught mid-sip or mid-laugh. You were afraid I'd be an embarrassment to the brand, I added, voice steady. Cassidy scoffed, trying to recover. This is a private event. I think you're confused. She signaled for someone, maybe a staff member or security. It didn't matter. Leo, standing at the back near the AV setup, tapped his screen. The massive LED display behind the stage flickered to life. First, the Calidora logo filled the screen, then the name, Rowan Lux Hospitality Group. Then came the reveal. In bold, cinematic clarity, owned and operated by Amelia Rowan, founder and CEO. A beat of silence fell over the room. One glass hit the marble floor with a sharp crack. Cassidy's face turned a deep, panicked red. That's not possible, she whispered. I walked to the center of the room and stopped directly in front of her. Would you like to see the deed? I asked gently. Or maybe my business card. I pulled the sleek black card holder from my pocket, just enough for her to see my name etched in gold. I didn't need her to take it. She'd seen enough. I turned slowly, making eye contact with every familiar face in that room. My father, my uncles, my cousins. For years you looked down on me. You joked. You excluded. You told me I was wasting my life chasing a dream with no name recognition. I stepped back just enough to see the screen behind me. Turns out that dream has a name now. It's lit up behind me. Leo began distributing sleek navy folders, one for every key family member. Inside, a curated overview of my business, the invoice for tonight's event, and a personal letter of acknowledgement. Cassidy opened hers like she was searching for a loophole. This is above market, she snapped, voice unsteady. 40% above, I confirmed. Family premium? Or penalty, depending on how you look at it. Lila burst into laughter from the back. A few cousins followed, nervously at first, then more freely as the reality settled over them. My father hadn't moved. He just stared at me, like he was seeing me for the first time. You own this place? He asked, softer than I'd ever heard him speak. And 23 others, I said. Across 7 countries. I let that land, then added, but this one's my favorite. It's the one you all deemed too good for me. I paused then, letting the silence do what words couldn't. Letting it sting in the spaces where no apology had ever lived. Cassidy stepped forward again, tone desperate now. We didn't mean, yes, I cut in, calm but clear. You did. Every time you mocked the motel, every time you acted like I was just playing hotel, every time you left me out of the picture, you meant it. You didn't believe I'd amount to anything. I turned to the room again. That's okay. You weren't supposed to believe in me. I was supposed to believe in myself, and I did. People looked away, embarrassed, ashamed, or maybe just shocked. The ones who used to brag about the Westmore legacy now had to reckon with the truth. The legacy they dismissed had quietly outgrown them. I've arranged upgraded suites for everyone, I said, keeping it gracious but firm. Private tours are available tonight. Tomorrow morning, there's a keynote in the garden about sustainable luxury design. I'll be giving it. You're welcome to attend. Or not. I turned slightly. Cassidy, unfortunately, we had to shift your room assignment last minute. We had a high-priority guest book the penthouse you'd reserved. You'll be in one of our queen suites. Garden view. She opened her mouth, then closed it. Nothing to say. Nothing she could say that would undo it. The same room category she once joked I'd be lucky to clean was now hers to sleep in. As the staff began escorting guests to their suites, I watched from the side, arms folded. Some walked silently. Others whispered apologies they didn't dare say out loud. My father stayed behind. His eyes were glassy. I was wrong, he said quietly. About you. About everything. I nodded. Yes. But do you know the best part of owning the resort? He raised an eyebrow. I get to choose which guests stay in which suite. I gestured toward the elevator. You can take the one overlooking the bay. Presidential. Best view in the city. Maybe you'll see things a little differently from there. That night, I sat in my private office, reviewing data and sipping tea while the city sparkled outside. Leo entered with a folder. Event stats. Also, some family members are asking if they can meet with you tomorrow. I smiled, not surprised. Let's keep the breakfast bookings open. I own the restaurant too. He nodded, then paused. That was poetic. I looked up. It wasn't about revenge, I said. It was about truth. They created the version of me they wanted to remember. Tonight, I introduced them to the version they never bothered to know. The next morning, the sun rose soft and gold over the bay, streaking across the windows of the Calidora like it too had something to say. I woke early, not out of nerves, but instinct. Years of running a hospitality empire trained me to rise before the world started asking questions. I padded barefoot across the hardwood floors of my penthouse suite, tea in one hand, tablet in the other. Guest feedback was already pouring in flawless service, exceptional ambiance, best sleep in months. Cassidy hadn't filled out her survey yet, probably still recovering from the emotional whiplash. I couldn't blame her. Everything she thought she controlled had slipped through her fingers in a matter of minutes. Her carefully curated illusion of power had collided with the one thing she never saw coming, the truth. I had no intention of humiliating anyone when I approved the reunion. Not really, but I wasn't going to hide anymore either. For years, I bit my tongue to avoid making waves. But now I'd built the ocean. If they wanted to wade in, they'd have to swim on my terms. As I made my way to the private garden terrace where breakfast was being served, I noticed something different. People weren't performing. They weren't posturing. They were quiet, curious, even cautious. My uncles, the same ones who once mocked my little motel business, stood by the mimosa bar whispering over tablets, probably Googling me. My cousins lingered by the koi pond, pretending not to watch me walk past while adjusting their designer sunglasses. And Cassidy? She sat at the edge of the terrace with her back straight, eyes glued to her phone, expression unreadable. Lila was already there, sipping coffee with a smirk. "You broke the internet," she said, sliding a phone my way. Headlines and posts lit up the screen. Reclusive hotel mogul revealed at private family event. Calidora owner stuns guests. With surprise appearance, Mia Rowan, the quiet billionaire behind the curtain. I blinked at the words, not in disbelief but in quiet realization. For the first time, the world knew me as I actually was. And they were fascinated. "You okay?" Lila asked gently, breaking the silence between us. I nodded. "Better than okay," she smiled. "Thought so. Dad's been pacing the hallway since 6 a.m. He keeps asking if you'll talk to him." "Maybe," I said, not out of spite but truth. Some conversations needed time to mean anything. As guests finished breakfast, I walked through the garden, offering short, pleasant greetings. They responded like people in church, polite, reverent, unsure if they were allowed to speak freely, and then came the ones who'd been quiet too long. My Aunt Harper approached first, all pearls and regret. "Mia," she began, "I want to say, I never knew what you were building. If I had, I cut her off gently. You did know. You just didn't care to ask." She blinked, caught between defensiveness and shame. "We were wrong," she offered. "It happens," I replied, not unkindly, but with the firmness of someone who no longer needed their validation. She stepped aside. Others followed, all with versions of the same line. "We didn't know. We didn't see. We didn't expect." That was the theme, wasn't it? My success only counted when it showed up in ways they could brag about. By late morning, I was back in the executive lounge, reviewing contracts for a new property in Morocco when Cassidy appeared. She looked different, less polished, more real. She stood in the doorway for a second, unsure whether to enter, then walked in slowly and sat across from me. No makeup, just her. "I've been thinking," she started, voice low. "That must have been exhausting," I said, not sarcastic, just honest. She cracked a tired smile. "Yeah, it was." Silence fell between us, but it wasn't tense this time. It was just quiet, truthful. "I owe you an apology," she said eventually. "Not just for the reunion thing, for everything. I treated you like you were beneath me because I needed to believe I was above someone. That's on me." I didn't reply right away. I wanted her to sit with it, let it settle. "You were afraid," I said finally. "Afraid that if someone like me could succeed without the Westmore name, then everything you believed about success might be wrong." She nodded slowly. "I didn't just want the spotlight. I wanted to believe it only shined on certain people, people like me. And not people like me, I finished for her." "Exactly," she whispered. There it was. The thing I waited years to hear, though I didn't realize it until she said it. The truth wasn't about what they thought of me. It was about what they needed to believe about themselves. Cassidy wasn't just a villain in my story. She was the mirror of a broken system, one built on appearances, legacy, and shallow wins. She stood up then. "I don't expect you to forgive me, but I wanted to say it out loud." "Good," I said, looking up at her. "You should." She hesitated, then added, "Your place is beautiful. I get it now. You didn't just build hotels. You built respect, and you did it quietly. I don't think I could have done that. You didn't need to, I replied. You were given respect for free. I had to earn mine. That's the difference. She nodded again, then left. No hug, no tears, just understanding. That afternoon, a few more family members dropped by, some curious, some apologetic, some still processing. I took meetings between them, closed a funding deal by phone, signed off on a campaign shoot for our Maldives resort, and reviewed site plans for a rooftop spa in Madrid. My world had never been small. It had just never overlapped with theirs. Until now. Around sunset, my father requested a private walk. We strolled slowly through the back gardens, past the olive trees and fountain courtyard. He kept his hands in his pockets, eyes on the ground, like the words might be hiding in the grass. I always wanted you to follow the plan, he said eventually, but you wrote your own. I looked at him, not cold, but cautious. You didn't just want me to follow the plan. You wanted me to stay small within it, safe, controlled. He didn't argue, just exhaled. You were right to leave, he admitted. You were brave. I tilted my head slightly. No, I was just tired of waiting for your permission to live my life. We stood in silence again, the kind that feels heavier than sound. Then he added, I'd like to get to know the woman you are now. If that door's still open. I studied him for a beat longer. This wasn't the man who once mocked my ambition. This was someone trying to reconnect with a daughter he never really saw. I own the door, I said finally. But you have to walk through it without pretending we never shut it. He nodded. Fair. As we returned to the main terrace, I realized something unexpected. I wasn't angry anymore. Not really. I'd held on to resentment like armor, but now that I'd stood in the truth, I didn't need the shield. Power wasn't about revenge. It was about release. About owning your story so completely that no one else could narrate it for you. That evening, dinner was served beneath a canopy of lights in the garden. No one gave speeches. No one postured. They just ate, laughed, listened. And for the first time in years, it felt less like a reunion and more like a beginning, a reset. After dessert, as people mingled near the fire pits and conversation flowed more naturally, I slipped away to the edge of the garden. Leo joined me, 2 glasses in hand. You did it, he said. They saw you. I took the glass, held it up, then paused. No, I saw me. That was the part I didn't realize I needed. He smiled. And what now? I looked out at the horizon. Now, we keep building. But not for them. For us. For every version of me who thought she wasn't enough. The morning after the dinner felt different. The air was lighter. The staff moved with their usual quiet grace, but the energy throughout the Calidora had shifted. Guests who used to walk past with polite disinterest now smiled, nodded, even thanked me. And not the performative kind of thanks people give when they feel obligated, but the kind that carried weight, respect. I didn't need it, but I noticed it. Because when you've spent years being underestimated, silence is familiar, but recognition still feels like a strange new language you're learning to translate in real time. I sat on the edge of the infinity pool with my coffee, feet dangling over the water, watching the sun climb above the skyline. My mind wasn't on the reunion anymore. It was already moving ahead, thinking of Paris, of Tokyo, of the signature property I'd been secretly developing on an island that didn't yet exist on most maps. The Calidora wasn't the peak, it was the gateway. I didn't want my story to end with a vindication. I wanted it to stretch, expand, become something generational. By mid-morning, I was back in the strategy room upstairs, going over projections with Leo. We were finalizing details for the launch of a new sustainability initiative across our global properties, one that would cut energy usage by 30% without sacrificing luxury. It was bold, disruptive, very me. Leo was pacing while reading metrics out loud, and I was half listening until he paused, phone in hand. You're going to want to see this, he said, his voice unreadable. I turned and took the phone. On screen was a forwarded message from our European PR rep. Subject line, urgent, interview leak. I clicked the link and watched the video. Cassidy, sitting in a bright white studio, surrounded by indoor plants and soft lighting, giving what looked like an exclusive post-reunion interview for a mid-tier lifestyle channel. At first, she talked vaguely about transformation and redefining family values, but then came the part that made my stomach clench. She claimed she'd played a pivotal role in reviving the Rowan Lux narrative, and that the reunion at the Calidora was part of a mutual journey toward reconciliation and rebranding. She dropped phrases like shared vision and collaborative growth, and somewhere in there, she even suggested she and I were discussing potential business ventures. I blinked at the screen, stunned not by the lies, but by the confidence it took to speak them with a smile. Damage control? Leo asked, already moving toward the crisis comms folder. Not yet, I said, calmer than I felt. Let's wait and watch. He looked skeptical. She's trying to hitch her name to your legacy. She's not the first, I replied, but I'll be the last word. Over the next 24 hours, the video made small waves. Not a viral explosion, but just enough to reach the fringes of our circles. Investors called not concerned, but curious. Journalists emailed, sniffing for a feud. A few of our competitors even poked at the narrative, probably hoping for a crack in the facade. I responded with silence. Not weakness, strategy. Because sometimes when people shout lies into the wind, the best move is to let the wind turn against them. Still, the timing irritated me. We were preparing to announce a landmark partnership in Dubai and preparing our first eco-forward floating villa line in Southeast Asia. I didn't need headlines muddying the work. So I called in one of our trusted brand partners, Anya Wolf, the media strategist behind 3 major global rebrands. Sharp, clean, deadly with a press release. When she arrived at the Caladora, she didn't even wait for coffee. She's overreaching, Anya said, flipping through a printed transcript. But not stupid. She's watching your moves and trying to blur the lines between her name and your success. You stay quiet, and she starts looking like the brains behind the empire. I nodded. So what's the play? Anya smiled. We don't address it, we outshine it. Spotlight her story for what it is. Small, surface level, and temporary. While you go global, she'll be stuck selling sound bites. That afternoon, we launched the pre-release teaser for our Paris flagship, an all-glass property overlooking the Seine, designed by a female-led architectural firm with 0 legacy connections. It wasn't just about stunning design. It was a statement. This industry was still dominated by names, old money, inherited clout. I wasn't any of those things. And yet, here I was, building an empire with nothing but clarity, grit, and my name carved into the cornerstone. The Paris launch trended globally in less than 8 hours. Every major outlet picked it up. And Cassidy's clip? It vanished under the weight of relevance. Not buried by a scandal, outpaced by success. Just how I liked it. But the story didn't end there. Because later that week, I got a call I never expected. Aunt Jo, the one who never spoke much, who always stood quietly next to Uncle Harvey at family gatherings, smiling politely and slipping extra rolls onto my plate when no one was looking. She asked to meet me in person. No explanation. Just that it was urgent and private. We met at the Garden Cafe inside the Caladora, where the lemon trees whispered in the breeze and everything smelled like citrus and sea salt. She looked smaller than I remembered, but her eyes were steady. She didn't waste time. You don't know this, she began, but I invested in your first property. I blinked. You what? She smiled. The Blue Fern in Silver Lake. You had no idea, but I was part of the silent syndicate that funded your pilot. I saw your pitch years ago through a friend at the bank. I didn't connect the dots until months later, and by then, I stayed quiet. I stared at her, trying to process it. Why wouldn't you tell me? Because I didn't want the rest of the family to poison it, she said softly. I wanted to see who you'd become when no one was helping, no one was watching, no one was trying to steer you. And you didn't just rise, you rebuilt the whole damn ladder. I sat back in my chair, stunned. She wasn't just the quiet one, she was a silent believer. And that belief changed everything. Why now? I asked. Why tell me this? Because, she said, pulling an envelope from her bag, I want you to have this. It's my shares. In the original property, it's yours now. I opened the envelope and found the deed transfer, signed and notarized. Jo. I started, but she raised a hand. Don't thank me. I didn't do it for thanks. I did it because I knew, even back then, that one day this family would need someone to lead it. Not the name, not the bloodline, the spirit. And you, Mia, you're the legacy now. Her words hit harder than I expected. Not because they were grand, but because they were true. I didn't need their validation. But the quiet kind of love, the kind that hides behind the noise, watches from a distance and shows up when it counts, that mattered. That night, as the Caladora settled into its final reunion hours, I walked the corridors alone, stopping occasionally to touch the walls, to remember that this place, once a blueprint on my dining table, was now real, alive, witness to something bigger than revenge. This wasn't just about proving myself. It was about claiming space, not with force, but with grace. And sometimes the most powerful legacy you can leave isn't loud or dramatic. It's the kind that grows in the cracks people left you in. Quiet, steady, unshakable, Just like me. 2 weeks after the reunion, the last traces of family chatter faded into the distance, replaced by something more familiar and demanding my work. The Calidora had returned to full capacity with bookings stretching into the next year. The Paris flagship had landed 5 major media features before breaking ground, and interest in the floating villa line had surpassed our most aggressive forecasts. My calendar was a symphony of negotiations, branding meetings, zoning permits, and private dinners with people whose names could shift markets with a sentence. The reunion was a milestone, but I never meant it to be the climax. That night was closure, not a destination, and yet, just when I thought things were finally aligning, the first crack appeared. Subtle, easy to miss unless you knew the signs. And I did. It started with a phone call from Nadia, my head of global operations. She never called during European hours unless something had gone sideways. "Mia," she said, her voice clipped. "We've got a problem in Singapore." My heart didn't race. It rarely did anymore. Experience had trained me not to panic. Panic wastes time. So I walked to the window of my Tokyo suite, glanced at the skyline, and listened. Nadia explained that one of our pending contracts for a new wellness resort on Sentosa Island had been abruptly rerouted to a competitor. Not just rerouted, hijacked. The land we'd been negotiating for months was suddenly signed over to a boutique group with no prior presence in the region. On paper, it looked clean, legal, but timing didn't add up. Connections didn't match, and something about the deal reeked of familiarity. Nadia said she'd dig deeper. I told her to move carefully and hung up. Then I sat down and opened the file myself. Names, documents, email chains. It didn't take long before I found it the missing puzzle piece I hadn't expected to see again. Alex Vega, my former strategic advisor, my trusted international lead, the same man who helped me break into the Middle East luxury sector 2 years ago and who, 6 months ago, had resigned with a smile and a handshake. No hard feelings, no drama, or so I thought. His name was listed as silent partner in the competing firm. And if I knew Alex at all, silent was the last thing he intended to be. He hadn't just taken the deal. He'd mirrored our pitch, copied our eco-forward design language, and even poached 2 junior architects from our European team. I stared at the screen, still calm but not indifferent. This wasn't a business loss. It was a personal breach. The kind of betrayal that doesn't sting immediately but burns later, like a slow-moving fire through old growth. I knew I'd have to respond. Not emotionally. Strategically. That's what separated me from people like Alex. He saw success as a game of advantage. I saw it as an ecosystem. What you poison always circles back. I spent the rest of the evening reviewing internal protections. The truth was, I'd seen this kind of move coming for years. That's why every major project under Rowan Lux carried embedded fail-safes, unique patents, staggered disclosures, and layered contingency plans. But ego wasn't immune to irritation. He knew enough to be dangerous, not enough to win, and the difference would be how I handled what came next. The next morning, I met with our legal team over breakfast, laying out the issue. Diana, my head counsel, looked over the documents and shook her head slowly. "We can't stop the project," she said, "but we can let it bury itself." I raised an eyebrow. "Explain." She leaned forward. "They mimicked the structure, not the substance. Our Singapore design relies on proprietary climate-responsive materials that aren't publicly listed. What they built looks identical, but it'll collapse under actual weather conditions within 2 years. They won't know that until it's too late. You protected the intellectual core." I sat back, exhaling once, not out of relief, out of focus. "So what do we do?" Diana smiled. "We let the world watch. But that wasn't enough. I didn't want Alex to fail quietly. I wanted him to understand exactly where he'd gone wrong, not to humiliate him, but to educate him. He needed to see the cost of underestimating someone who'd built their power on precision, not position. I flew to Singapore within the week, quietly. No press, no entourage. Just me, Leo, and the lead architect from our design division. We toured the site Alex's firm had begun transforming. From the outside, it was impressive, sleek, ambitious, minimalistic in all the right ways. But to anyone who knew the blueprints, it was a bad translation of a better idea. We didn't interrupt. We didn't confront. We watched. And when we left, I asked Leo to arrange a lunch meeting with Alex the next day. He said yes, of course he did. Arrogance always thinks it's still welcome. We met in a high-rise restaurant with panoramic views of the water. He arrived late, wore a smirk that used to be charming when we were allies. I didn't shake his hand. "I assume you know why we're here," I said as the waiter poured still water. He leaned back, relaxed. To discuss my comeback, he said. I smiled, not because it was funny, but because it confirmed everything. You're not coming back, I said calmly. You're repeating history badly and calling it innovation. His smile faltered. Mia, this is business. It's not personal. It was business when you left, I said. It became personal the moment you tried to steal something you didn't understand. He leaned forward, tone sharp. I know your formula. You know the surface, I replied, not the soul. You copied what looked like value, but you don't know what holds it together. You never cared to learn. I stood up then, placing a small portfolio on the table, and there is a breakdown of every flaw in your current build. I'm giving it to you for free, not because you deserve it, but because I want you to know exactly why it failed when it does. He looked stunned, not because of the words, but the gesture. People like Alex expect revenge. They don't know what to do when you hand them reality instead. I walked away without looking back. The deal was done. The lesson delivered. Let the consequences teach him what pride wouldn't. On the flight back to Los Angeles, I sat in silence, staring out at clouds like slow waves. Power didn't mean control. It meant clarity. The ability to choose restraint over retaliation, vision over vengeance. I built Rowan Lux to be resilient, not reactive. And that meant learning to let people disqualify themselves while you stay focused on building. Back home, my office was already buzzing with updates. Paris permits cleared. The floating villa deal signed. And a new, unexpected proposal waiting this time from a government partnership in New Zealand to develop an Indigenous-led cultural wellness retreat. My heart stirred. This wasn't just expansion. This was legacy work rooted in listening, respect, something Alex would never understand. But I did. I always had. That's what made all the difference. There's a moment, after every high, when the world feels too quiet. Not empty, just still. A pause before the next surge. That's where I found myself 3 weeks after the Singapore fallout. I had no speeches to give, no fires to put out, no headlines to manage, just silence, space, and something in me that didn't know what to do with it. I had achieved everything I set out to prove. The family saw me. The industry respected me. The people who doubted me now watched from the sidelines with curiosity or quiet admiration. Yet, what surprised me wasn't the satisfaction. It was the question that came with it. What now, Mia? What do you build when there's no one left to doubt you? I stood in the center of the newest Rowan Lux property, still under construction, raw and half-finished. The walls were bare, the floors unfinished, but the air already held promise. It was in that untouched space I realized something. My story didn't end with proving myself to others. It began with building a life that reflected who I truly was, not who I had to defend. That clarity followed me everywhere for the next few weeks. From site visits in coastal Spain to digital planning sessions with our creative team in Cape Town, I started turning down interviews. Not because I was retreating, but because I was done narrating my own legitimacy. It was already carved into concrete, into glass, into signatures that stretched across oceans. The work spoke for itself, and in the quiet, I found room for a different kind of growth. One that didn't look like square footage or revenue, but felt like presence, ownership of self, not just spaces. I spent a week in Queenstown walking through the land proposed for the Indigenous Wellness Retreat. I met with elders, sat in silence during their ceremonies, listened more than I spoke. They didn't care about my portfolio. They wanted to know who I was without the accolades. At first, that scared me, stripping away the titles, the armor. But the more I sat with them, the more I realized how much I'd built around proving and how little I'd built around just being. One afternoon, an elder named Hina asked me a question that stopped me cold. She looked at me, eyes sharp but kind, and said, "Do you know how to rest, Mia?" I didn't answer right away, because I didn't know. Not really. I had mastered momentum. I had built a life where stillness felt foreign, where silence equaled danger. But what if rest wasn't surrender? What if it was stewardship? What if holding space for yourself was just as powerful as building something that everyone else could see? That night, I called Leo and told him I'd be stepping back for a while, not walking away, just shifting. I asked him to lead the final design phase of the Paris flagship and oversee the New Zealand partnership until I returned. He didn't flinch. "About time," he said. "You've earned a season of stillness." I smiled into the phone. "I'm not disappearing, just learning how to take up space differently." He laughed. "And I'll keep your seat warm at the table." A week later, I returned to the Calidora. No headlines, no reunion, just me. I booked a standard suite, one of the garden-level rooms with a small patio and a view of the lemon trees. The same room category Cassidy once looked down on. The same type one used to clean. I stayed 3 nights. No meetings, no demands. Just long walks through the corridors I once raced down with blueprints in my hand. Quiet breakfasts in the courtyard. A handwritten thank you to the cleaning staff, addressed to each by name. It was surreal to exist inside something I had once only imagined. But more than surreal, it was grounding. A reminder that everything I had built came from a place of being deeply seen by myself. Long before anyone else had the vision. On the 3rd morning, I sat beneath the olive trees with a notebook in my lap. Not for work, for reflection. I wrote letters I never sent. One to my father, one to Cassidy, one to the younger version of me who used to cry in the back of a staff locker room after being laughed at during another family event. And then I wrote one more to the woman I was now. It wasn't long. Just a few lines. But it was everything. You didn't climb to prove them wrong. You rose to remember who you are. And now that you've made it, don't shrink for anyone. Not even the version of you that needed the noise. Let her go. And hold steady. That night, I hosted a private dinner in the rooftop greenhouse. No guests, no press. Just Lila, Leo, and Aunt Jo. 3 people who saw different versions of me before I ever made headlines. We ate slowly, laughed loudly, and didn't talk about the empire. We talked about books, about childhood memories, about things that had nothing to do with business or legacy. I told them about Hina, about the question, about the rest I was finally allowing. They didn't ask why now, they just nodded. Because sometimes your people don't need an explanation. They just meet you in the pause. As the meal ended, Lila pulled out a gift, a tiny glass key. Inside was a swirl of gold dust, suspended and still. "What's this?" I asked. "A reminder," she said, "that not every door needs to be opened by force. Some are already yours." I held the key in my palm for a long time after they left. Not because it was symbolic, but because it was true. I didn't need to fight anymore. Not with them, not with the world, not even with myself. The next morning, I checked out of the Calidora anonymously. Left no note, no fanfare, just a quiet thank you at the desk. As I drove away, I glanced in the rearview mirror and saw the resort's name shimmer in the rising sun. I didn't stop. I didn't slow down. But this time, I didn't feel like I was running towards something. I felt like I was exactly where I was meant to be. Later that year, the New Zealand retreat opened to quiet acclaim. No red carpet, just a soft unveiling rooted in ancestral blessing and community care. I attended, not as founder, but as witness. I spoke only once, thanking the elders for trusting us, for showing me that legacy isn't about what you leave behind. It's about what you nurture while you're still here. And as the ceremony ended, someone asked if I was planning to return to the spotlight soon. I smiled. I never needed the spotlight, I said. I just needed to stop hiding. And that was it. No epilogue, no final twist. Just a woman fully in her power, finally choosing how and where she shows up. Not to perform, but to live. If you're still here, reading this, thank you. You've walked with me through the awkward silences, the overlooked years, the rise, the reckoning, and now the peace. And maybe that's the real story. Not about revenge, not even about legacy, but about choosing yourself long enough, hard enough, honestly enough that the world has no choice but to make space. And when they do, don't shrink. Don't whisper. Take the mic, say your name, then build something they'll never forget. Not out of spite, but out of grace. That's the power I found. That's the space I claimed. And I hope, in your own way, you claim yours too. Story 2, they thought I was just another numbers girl. So, they fired me. What? They didn't know? I own 90% of the company. It happened in Austin, Texas, just last fall. I was 38 and had quietly spent the last 7 years building our logistics division from the ground up. Not that anyone gave me credit for it. Then barged in Blake Carver, the Golden Boy CEO, Harvard MBA, and walking TED Talk. No knock, no respect, just swagger. Cologne and a folder were slapped onto my desk like a mic drop. We need to talk. I paused mid-sentence, mid-projection charts and trends that had been consistently outperforming expectations. But apparently none of that mattered. Blake never bothered learning what I actually did or who I really was. I just thought I was another background figure in the office, the kind of woman he could dismiss without consequence. We're restructuring, he said. The board wants a new direction. I tilted my head. You're firing me? We're not making a scene here, he replied, smirking. You're being released from your position, effective immediately. No performance review, no warning. Not a word about the record-breaking quarter my team just posted. He kept talking. Something about me lacking executive presence that I wasn't. People focused enough. His voice was smug, but all I could hear was the quiet hum of irony building behind my calm smile. I stood slowly, closed the folder, and said, "You might want to check the shareholder breakdown before you send out any announcements." That's when he froze. Because what Blake didn't know was that I wasn't just a spreadsheet manager. I was the majority shareholder, the controlling vote, the real owner. And now he worked for me. Blake's eyes narrowed. He was waiting for me to cry, panic, or maybe even plead. But I dealt with too many overpromoted boys with fragile egos to let this one see me flinch. "I'll need your laptop and badge by the end of the day," he said, trying to sound authoritative. "Your access ends at 5. Severance info with HR as usual." I stood calm and measured and extended my hand. "Thanks for the clarity." He hesitated, then shook it like he was declaring victory. Blake strutted out with the same smug grin he wore during his mere morning pep talks. He had no idea I was more than just another division head, and no one else in that glass fishbowl of an office did either. But 2 weeks earlier, everything changed when I executed a strategic acquisition quietly, a private sale that gave me controlling interest in the company my father helped build from the ground up. The same company Blake just kicked me out of. I glanced at the photo on my desk, Dad grinning next to me at the ribbon cutting of our first West Coast office. He used to say, "Wait for the moment, and when it comes, don't blink." So I didn't. I packed lightly, just the photo, a well-worn notebook, and my favorite coffee mug outside my office. The silence was deafening. Eyes darted up from screens, then away. Some looked confused, others uncomfortable. A few pitied me. Let them wander. I walked out into the Texas sun, feeling 20 pounds lighter. They thought I'd been buried, but really they just cleared my runway. I pulled out my phone and texted my attorney. "It's time. Let's move." He replied almost instantly. "Understood. We can call a shareholder vote by Friday." I looked back once at the shiny facade behind me. Blake thought he ended my career, but the next time I walked through those doors, I wouldn't be wearing a badge. I'd be sitting at the head of the table as the owner, and I wouldn't just smile. I'd run the meeting. If you felt that shift of power like I did, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. The next part, let's just say Blake's about to learn what happens when the spreadsheet girl owns the boardroom. My father didn't just leave me a company. He left me his gift for timing and patience. 2 weeks before Blake Carver tossed me out like yesterday's quarterly report, I was sitting in an old office downtown, lined with polished mahogany, the air scented with leather, aging books, and quiet authority across from me, said Walter Langston, our family's attorney. Since I was a kid riding around the office on a tricycle. He slid a thick envelope across the desk and folded his hands. "Your father was very clear, Juliet. He said you turned 38 in 2 days. He wanted you to open this on your birthday." I raised an eyebrow. "A birthday card?" "A scavenger hunt for hidden stocks." He smiled like someone who knew more than he let on. I didn't open it right away. I waited just like Dad used to. Wait for the perfect moment to speak his mind on the morning of my birthday. I sat in his favorite leather chair by the window. Sunlight filtered through the blinds like it always did when he'd sip coffee and read the paper, pretending the world made sense in black and white. I opened it with a calm I didn't feel. The envelope held 2 things, a gold-sealed legal document and a handwritten letter in Dad's tidy, deliberate script. "Juliet, if you're reading this, it means you've turned 38. I've watched you work harder than anyone, take less credit than you deserved, and stay quiet when louder voices took up all the air. I also watched what happened after I passed. I feared it might go this way, so I made sure you'd have more than just a seat at the table. I gave you the table." I froze, my fingers trembled. I had to put the letter down just to breathe. The trust document was airtight, notarized, and final. My father never sold his 90% controlling stake. He kept it and placed it all in my name. Effective on my 38th birthday. 90% full voting power. Instant control. I read it once, then again, then a third time, just to be sure. I wasn't just a shareholder. I was the company. Still in my pajamas, I called Langston. "Is this real?" I whispered. "As real as it gets," he replied without hesitation. "Your father set it up carefully. The board doesn't know unless you tell them they won't." I sat in stunned silence. I had been trying to earn my place when I already held the keys. "Why now?" I asked. "Your father wanted you to experience the company first," Langston said gently, "to see if you truly wanted it, to see who revealed themselves. And they had Blake, the board, everyone who assumed I was just a glorified analyst. He knew they'd overlook me, underestimate me, and try to box me out. And he knew I wouldn't walk away. The next morning, I called Langston again. "We're calling a shareholders meeting," I said, "but don't notify the board yet. Not until I say so." He paused. Juliet, what exactly do you have planned? I looked out at downtown Austin. The city kept buzzing like nothing had changed. I plan to walk into that boardroom, I said, and show them exactly who they tried to dismiss. I ignored his follow-ups, skipped the exit interview, and didn't return a single email. Instead, I met Langston at a quiet coffee shop tucked into a side street, the kind of place where no one asks for job titles. He sipped a cappuccino, a folder in front of him. "You're about to drop a grenade into their boardroom," he said, tapping the folder. I didn't blink. "They pulled the pin when they fired me." He nodded. Inside the folder was the official filing notice of a special shareholders meeting. Executive leadership review is on the agenda. Blake didn't see it coming. That was the point. His whole playbook was swagger and projection, just enough knowledge to intimidate those who wouldn't fight back. But his confidence. It was a house of cards, and I was the breeze. The meeting was set for Tuesday. Not too soon to raise suspicion. It's not too late to let them build a defense. My final stop that day was Caroline Winters, the quiet keeper of my father's trust. She didn't bother with small talk. She opened her file, glanced at me, and said, "Are we ready to take it back?" I smiled. "We're not just taking it back," I said. "We're taking over." She slid the folder across the desk like she was delivering military intelligence. Caroline Winters, my father's most trusted advisor, looked me dead in the eye. "I've watched that man dismantle your father's legacy piece by piece, Juliet," she said, her voice low and firm. "You owe him no courtesy." Inside the folder were internal audits, ownership certificates, voting records, and an employee culture report that read like a slow-motion train wreck. Staff satisfaction is down 38%. Departmental turnover is up 47% in HR complaints, buried like secrets in a locked drawer. Blake spun, manipulating short-term gains to hide long-term incompetence. Caroline added, not blinking. "If it continues for 2 more years, the company collapses." I sat in silence and let the weight of it settle over me into my bones. "I'm not going to yell," I said. "Finally, I won't gloat." "You won't have to," she replied with a wry smile. "Let the numbers speak." As I left her office, I passed an old portrait hanging in the hallway, my father standing proudly outside our original headquarters, one hand resting protectively on the shoulder of a little girl in a red dress. Me? He looked younger than I ever remembered, steady, almost like he knew this day would come. By Monday, the office rumor mill was in overdrive. My phone was a flood of texts. "Are you okay? What happened?" "Blake's acting like he got promoted or something. HR won't say a word. It's weird." I didn't answer. "Not yet. Let them wander. Let Blake bask in it. The higher he felt, the sweeter the drop." That evening, I pulled out a navy blue suit I had bought 5 years ago for a dream job that never materialized. It still fit like it had been waiting for this. I rehearsed what I'd say. Not a speech, just a few words. Sharp, clean, no embellishment. Just truth. Tuesday morning, I arrived 5 minutes early. Alone? No entourage. Just me. A folder in the law at the front desk. The receptionist glanced up. "Froze. Juliet?" I smiled. "Good morning. Upstairs." Langston was already waiting near the elevators, calm and collected as always. "They're in there," he said. "Blake's in the middle of a strategy session. He thinks he's got it all figured out. I just did my jacket." Took a deep breath and nodded. Not for long. We walked together toward the frosted glass doors of the boardroom. When I opened them, the silence hit like a pin dropped into gasoline. The room had been buzzing. Casual banter, chuckled someone, flipping through the printed agenda. It stopped the second I stepped in. Blake was mid-sentence, pacing like a tech bro on stage. He turned, eyes landing on me. His face twitched, confused, irritated, and then stunned. "Juliet." His voice rose. "This meeting is for board members only." I smiled politely, walked to the head of the table, pulled out the chair, and set down my folder. "Exactly," I said and took my seat. Dead silence. Blake blinked at the papers, then at me, back to the room, searching for someone to laugh and call this a prank. No one did. He tried again. Louder. As I said, employees aren't allowed in these sessions. I met his gaze and held it. "I'm not an employee," I said, pausing just long enough for it to sting. "I'm the majority shareholder." The temperature dropped 5 degrees. Chair straightened. Eyes widened. Even Mr. Dalton, our oldest board member, leaned in and adjusted his glasses. He reached for the top document in the folder, brows furrowing as he scanned the gold seal. "Is this accurate?" he asked, voice gravelly. "It is. I confirmed the trust transferred 90% of my father's shares to me on my 38th birthday. Everything's filed and notarized. You'll find it all in compliance." Blake looked like someone had yanked his power cord mid-presentation, his jaw clenched, his cheeks flushed and blotchy waves. For once, he had no words. I had waited long enough, and now the real meeting could begin. As expected, Blake turned to insults. The last refuge of a man cornered by truth and stripped of illusion. "You can't be serious," he scoffed. "This is personal. A grudge? A stunt." I remained seated, calm. It's not a grudge, it's accountability. My father trusted me with this because he knew what this place could become without someone watching. That landed. I felt the ripple travel down the table. No one spoke, but I saw the recognition in their eyes. Blake hadn't led the company with vision. He had fed his ego and built a hollow empire. The numbers didn't lie. His curtain was slipping. Thread by thread, I opened the second folder. This meeting was called to conduct a formal review of the company's executive leadership, beginning with the office of the CEO. Blake jumped to his feet. "This is a coup." I looked at him evenly. "I'm not asking." My voice didn't rise, but the silence did. I began distributing copies of the financial report. Let's talk performance. No drama, no flair, just facts. Employee satisfaction has dropped 38%. Departmental turnover is up 47%. HR has 3 active unresolved discrimination claims. I watched their faces shift as the weight of it set in. Some squirm aimed. Others glanced at each other. Nobody spoke in the same quarter. Our competitors reported growth. I continued. We stayed flat. That's not market fluctuation. That's mismanagement. Then I turned to the next section. Excessive spending on executive perks. Travel reimbursements with no documentation. Bonuses approved during a hiring freeze. All under Blake's directive. Blake's face flushed. "You're twisting the numbers." He barked. "You're making them fit your narrative." I didn't blink. I don't have to twist anything. The truth is loud enough. He looked around for backup. No one moved. "You counted on no one having the authority to challenge you," I said, letting my thoughts linger in the air. That assumption ends today. I slid the final folder forward. This is a formal motion to remove Blake Carver as CEO, effective immediately. Pending final documentation. The boardroom went so still and quiet I could hear the nervous shift of a leather chair. The board secretary leaned toward me and whispered, "You don't need a second." "No," I said. "I hold 90% of the voting power." Dalton adjusted his glasses. "With that majority, the motion carries automatically. It's official." Blake slammed his fist on the table. "This is a joke, a power grab." I looked at him the same way I had the day he fired me. Calm, unshaken. "You taught me how to handle being dismissed," I said. "Now it's your turn." He stood there stunned, shoulders drooping under the weight of power he no longer held. No one reached out to stop him as he walked toward the door. His exit was quiet. Finally, the door clicked shut behind him. I looked back at the board. This company deserves better, so do its people. That starts today. Dalton leaned back and nodded. "Welcome back, Juliet?" No applause followed. No music swelled. Just quiet acknowledgement that power had shifted for good. The next day wasn't about revenge. It was about repair. I didn't move into the CEO office that morning. Didn't change the nameplate. Didn't strut down the hallway or bask in any glory. The company wasn't fixed by taking a bigger desk. It had to be rebuilt from the inside. The following Monday, I called an all-hands meeting. Not in some flashy hall, but in the same conference room where Blake had once handed out stale praise and inflated projections to the same 3 men. But this time, the atmosphere was different. People filed in slowly, whispering and glancing nervously. Uncertainty hung in the air like static before a storm. The front rows were empty. No one wanted to assume anything. I stepped to the front with just a black notebook. No slides, no buzzwords, just me. I cleared my throat. "Some of you know who I am," I said. "Some of you only know the version someone else told you. Today I want to tell you for myself." And then we begin. Let me start by saying this. I didn't come back to take control. I came back to rebuild trust. That made a few people actually look up. Not a nod, not a smile. Just attention. "This company wasn't built on titles," I said. "It was built on your ideas, your late nights, and your belief that what we were creating actually mattered." I scanned the room. Familiar faces. New ones, too. Some cautiously curious, others guarded. "I used to eat lunch with the engineering team," I continued. "I got strategy proposals from junior analysts that the last exec team never even opened. Receptionists who never got so much as a birthday card kept this place running like clockwork." I let that breathe. Somewhere along the way, we lost that. Then, quietly, I smiled. Last week, someone told me I wasn't leadership material. that I didn't belong here. And to be honest, a few nervous chuckles. The tension loosened. They weren't entirely wrong. I don't clap for showmanship. I don't kiss rings. I don't pretend problems don't exist. I build real leadership. It doesn't wear a title, it listens. And for the next 2 weeks, that's all I did. I didn't barricade myself in some shiny corner office. I walked the halls, sat in break rooms, asked questions, and stayed quiet long enough to hear the answers. What's broken? What's missing? Who's taking credit and who's doing the actual work? The patterns emerged fast. Some people strutted around bloated with unearned authority. Others were patching holes with duct tape and determination, holding entire teams together with zero recognition. So I started moving pieces quietly but deliberately. I promoted Maya, a former customer service rep who'd been running her team unofficially for over a year. Her old boss had marked her as average. Now Maya has a door with her name on it and a team of her own. I brought Kevin back, an engineer who'd left after being passed over in favor of someone louder, but less capable. He stepped into my office like it was a dream. "Are you serious?" he asked. "Dead serious," I told him. "Come fix what they broke." I overhauled HR dusty complaint files were pulled off shelves. I read through every one of them, met with the people who thought no one ever would. The silent reports, the quiet resignations, and middle managers who ruled through manipulation, gaslighting, and fear, gone. No grand exits, just accountability. Then I finally launched something that had been sitting in my father's notebook for years. The People First Initiative is a system to recognize the unseen, to reward creativity, to promote fairness, and to honor the ones who solve more problems than they cause. The quiet innovators, the overlooked geniuses, the people too busy doing the work to brag in meetings. No more whisper networks, no more locked doors, no more where a family speaks while ignoring real issues. Just real people doing real work, finally getting real credit. One night around 9 p.m., I was walking the halls alone. It used to feel sterile here, like success had a dress code and bedtime, but now I heard laughter in a conference room. Someone microwaving leftovers while cracking jokes on Slack. Plants on desks were actually alive again. One had a sticky note that read, "Water me. I'd like to live like all of us." Passing the engineering bullpen, I noticed a whiteboard tucked behind the main desk with blue marker scrawled small in the corner. She came back twice, underlined. She didn't fire Martin. She just came back. I stood there staring for a long moment. No press release, no title change, no boardroom takedown. Couldn't match that. That was the win. The next Monday, I finally walked into the CEO's office. Not because I had something to prove, but because I had something to restore. I didn't bring much. No fancy decor, no giant framed photos. Just one picture, my father and me on opening day outside the very first office. He was laughing. I was 7. My cheeks were sticky with something, probably jelly. I placed it in the corner of the desk and sat down. Not in triumph, but in purpose. This wasn't a takeover. It was a beginning. It felt like a homecoming. They thought they had seen the last of me when they fired me, but I returned exactly 1 year later. Not as an employee, but as their future. I stood once more at the same glass doors where I had once exited, with a cardboard box and a composed smile. Only now I wore a fitted navy suit, carried a slim black folder, and held the full weight of the company's direction in my hands. The receptionist looked up and immediately stood. "Miss Wren." "Good morning, Elena," I replied, offering a soft smile. "We're all on the same team now." She smiled back genuinely this time. Not the forced professional kind I used to see. Upstairs, the layout hadn't changed. The same polished walnut doors, the same skyline stretching out over downtown Austin. But everything else felt different. The air had shifted lighter now. People didn't flinch when someone from the C-suite walked past. They looked up and said hello, stopped pretending to be invisible. I kept Martin's old office mostly intact. No grand desk with golden nameplates, no oversized monitors. Broadcast metrics like a stock floor, and absolutely no framed leadership quotes hanging above a leather throne. Just a clean walnut desk. A pair of comfortable chairs and photos lining the walls of us. Not me. Launch days, hackathons, office birthday parties. Little moments that mattered far more than Martin ever realized. The only portrait behind my desk was of my father. Not to glorify him, but to guide me. That morning, we reviewed our quarterly report. Best numbers we'd seen in 5 years. Customer satisfaction was up 23%. Employee retention is up 41%. Revenue is the highest on record, but that's not what stayed with me. It was how we got there. Not through pressure, not through fake metrics or 11 p.m. PANIC emails asking people to bleed for bonuses they'd never see. We got there together with honesty, with transparency. People weren't whispering over coffee anymore. They were speaking in open rooms and being heard. Good people weren't just retained. They were empowered. Authority wasn't hoarded. We passed the mic for the first time in a long time. This place felt human again. There was a knock at the door. "Come in." I called Maya and stepped inside, clipboard in hand. Our head of client experience is still wearing her beat-up Converse. We never told people they needed to dress like bankers to be great here. "Are you ready?" she asked, grinning under her glasses. "They're all waiting in the conference room." I grabbed my folder and followed her down the hallway. The boardroom wasn't new, but the faces were. Half the board were women now, a few in their 40s, others in their 50s. Sales, engineering, and design, all represented. No more rooms full of identical suits, talking in circles and calling it strategy. At the center of the table sat Richard Tanaka, our newest strategic advisor. Smart measured a man who spoke less but always meant more, the kind of quiet wisdom my dad would have respected. "Elena," Richard said, nodding as I took my seat, "would you say a few words before we begin?" I hadn't planned to, but maybe that's why it mattered. I stood, the room hushed. But this time it wasn't pressure. I felt it was trust. "I want to thank every one of you," I said, "for believing in something different. For choosing the hard road when staying comfortable would have been easier." I smiled once I was told I wasn't leadership material. There were chuckles and a few nods. "But leadership," I continued, "isn't about titles or upgrades to first class. It's about vision, accountability, and the courage to say the uncomfortable thing when it needs to be said." I glanced at the portrait behind me, my father holding the same red ribbon from our first opening day. "He built this company on those principles," I said. "And I'm proud to say we're finally living them again. No cheers, no standing ovation, just soft, sustained applause, the kind that lasts longer than the sound itself." Later that afternoon, I took the long walk back to my office and stopped by marketing to see an intern beaming after wrapping up her first full campaign. Swung through product developers, laughing over half-sketched ideas and half-eaten snacks. And for the first time in years, I didn't just see employees. I saw a family rebuilt, reborn. And this time, I wasn't the one proving I belonged. I was simply leading us home. Not exhausted, not guarded, just alive. On the last day of one internal rotation, someone brought cupcakes to the break room. I grabbed one, pulled up a chair, and spent 20 minutes listening to a group of interns talk about nothing particularly important. And that was leadership, not always the big vision. Sometimes it's about its presence being there, creating a space where people can simply exist without fear. I didn't come back to settle scores. I came back to give good people a real shot, to build a culture where kindness wasn't mistaken for weakness, where the soft-spoken engineer didn't get passed over, where client support wasn't treated like a cul-de-sac career, and where respect, not fear, was the currency of influence. They fired me a year ago, smiling, delivering some hollow line about a new vision. And now? Now we have vision for real. But this time, it doesn't belong to one person in a corner office. It belongs to everyone in the room. This story isn't just mine. It belongs to anyone who's ever been underestimated, overlooked, or quietly pushed aside. So, drop a comment below. Let me know what part of this hit home for you. Tell me about your own comeback, your quiet strength, or that moment you realized your voice mattered. I read everyone, and if you felt something from this journey, subscribe. Not for me, but for us. For the stories that don't always get told. For the ones that don't end with revenge, but with rebuilding, with real leadership, with doing the right thing even when no one's watching. My advice? Don't waste your energy proving yourself to people who never intended to see you. Build something bigger, something true. Leadership isn't loud. It doesn't always wear a suit. Sometimes it's sitting in a break room with a cupcake, listening to someone who just needed to be heard. Whatever you're working toward, keep going. Stay kind. Stay steady. And when your moment comes, don't flinch, because one day you'll walk back through those same doors. Not for revenge, but to show them what leadership really looks like.